All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special Facebook Live event. I'm Joseph Grove, host of the Animal Wellness Podcast, and our topic this morning is the case of State of Wyoming versus Cody J. Roberts. It's a case we've been following since February of 24, when Cody Roberts, a resident of Daniel, Wyoming, intentionally ran down a young female wolf with his snowmobile. The wolf was seriously injured, but instead of getting treatment for her or immediately ending her suffering, he brought her home. He kept her, and then he muzzled her mouth shut with duct tape and took her to his favorite bar. There, he used her to amuse other patrons, and he posed for pictures that show him laughing and mocking her. Only after he had tormented the wolf thusly did he take her behind the bar and shoot her. Because of the bizarre cruelty, the case has drawn international attention and wrath. Local prosecutors took note and at length brought the facts to a Wyoming grand jury, which indicted Roberts on a felony animal cruelty charge. A trial was scheduled for next week, but just a few days ago, prosecutors and defense attorneys announced that a plea deal had been reached. The terms of the plea deal have been presented to the court, and the reason we're here today is to learn whether the judge in the case will accept it. Under the proposed agreement, Roberts would plead guilty to a felony animal cruelty charge and receive 18 months of supervised probation. He would pay a $1,000 fine. He would not, however, serve jail time. During the probation period, he would be barred from hunting, fishing, consuming alcohol, and entering bars or liquor stores. And if Roberts were to violate the terms of the probation, he could face a much harsher sentence, including the possibility of jail. Critics of the deal, including Animal Wellness Action, many wildlife advocates, and members of the public, argue that the punishment being considered does not adequately reflect the severity of the cruelty involved. Others, however, argue that given the likelihood Roberts would be acquitted by a local jury against a backdrop of anti-wolf sentiment, the guilty plea and its consequences, these people say, likely represent a best-case scenario. During this live stream, we'll walk through what's happening in real time, explain the legal issues surrounding the plea deal, and discuss the broader implications for animal protection and wildlife law. Joining me today are several people who have been closely following this case and who can help us understand what's unfolding. First, Wayne Pacelli, president of Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. He has been deeply involved in bringing national attention to this case, and he is here to talk about it from an animal welfare perspective. And we're also joined by Kate Schultz. She is a senior attorney for our organization, and she will help explain the legal dimensions of what's happening in court today. Kate was the staff attorney of the Animal Law Litigation Clinic at Lewis and Clark Law School, and she was an assistant district attorney for 5 years in New York, where she specialized in investigating and prosecuting crimes against animals. Lindsay Von Bush, our director of public relations, is monitoring the courthouse live stream, listening in real time, and she'll interrupt us as events unfold that she wants us to know about. And I also believe we're going to be joined by Lisa Robertson of Wyoming Untrapped. She is inside the courtroom, and as soon as it's over, the event, we hope she'll come out and give us some color, let us know what she heard that maybe didn't make it to the live stream. So a lot going on. This is our first major Facebook Live event, so thank you for joining us and being patient with us as we go through what may be a lot of information. Kate, let's start with you. I'm no lawyer, but I did watch every episode of LA Law twice, so I'm not sure I've got everything right as I described it. Have I cast it correctly, and what else would you add?
You have cast it perfectly, Joseph, and I'll have you know that when I was growing up, I watched every episode of Law and Order with my parents before and after dinner, so that's actually good training.
Well, all right. Well, good. Well, I'm glad we're both well educated on this. So you and I had a couple of conversations before we got together this morning, and you have some insight into how plea deals are made, how judges consider them. Talk us through what the judge may be listening for when Cody Roberts, the attorneys, are in front of him today.
Sure. That's an excellent question. Thank you, Joseph. Well, today maybe we're not really sure yet how lengthy or how detailed the proceeding today may be. Sometimes plea deals are very rote. This is fairly common, so they may last between 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how much work has already happened behind the scenes. Whether or not the parties have already informed the judge by speaking to his chambers, and whether or not the judge has already done his own work on the side in preparation for the plea deal. Other times, the judge may have questions for Mr. Roberts upon the presentation of the plea, and we don't really know what's the case here. Sometimes the judge may ask the defendant to describe in his own words what he did. In other times, the judge merely reads the indictment or a similar sort of literature and asks Mr. Roberts to say yes or no to whether or not he pleads guilty to that, along with a host of other questions such as, are you taking the plea voluntarily and of your own will? Has anyone forced you to take the plea? Et cetera, et cetera. Plea deals can be a little boring sometimes, but they're still very important and necessary proceedings for very obvious reasons.
I was grateful you corrected my use of the word hearing. This is not technically a hearing. What is happening today, and why is it not a hearing?
That's a good question. And while I am an annoying, nitpicky person, a little bit of a legal nerd, I think it is useful for the general public just to understand the basics of what words mean when we're talking about litigation. A hearing usually refers to a proceeding where a question of fact or law is being determined. So evidence is being presented before the judge, legal arguments are being presented before the judge. This is not that. We're not really having legal arguments or evidence being presented. We're having a proceeding to determine whether or not Mr. Roberts is pleading guilty, which he has the right to do or not to do, and to determine whether the judge accepts that plea and then what the sentence being opposed is. So it's just sort of a little bit of a nitpicky term, but in general, many court appearances are just appearances or proceedings.
What percentage of plea deals, Kate, are accepted by the judge, and I guess by default, what percentage are kicked back or outweighs or rejected? I'm not saying it right, but you know what I mean, I hope.
No, that rejected is the perfect correct term. I would say that over 99% of plea deals are accepted by a judge, and less than 1% would be rejected. It's extremely unusual, in part because it would be the judge potentially overstepping his role. No one knows, except for the prosecutor and members of the prosecutor's office, the strength of the case right now. We have reason to believe that there may only be one, that the case may rely on only a handful or even just one witness. Only the prosecutor knows whether or not that witness is still cooperating, or whether for a variety of potential reasons, the witness may not even show up to trial. So only the prosecutor knows at this point whether or not he even has a case, whether or not he can even bring this case to trial. That's why judges are a little hesitant to step into that sort of space and decide whether or not he believes the plea deal is acceptable. He may very well have his own moral, ethical, or policy reasons that he does not like the plea deal, but for very good reasons, judges are loath to overstep their boundaries and potentially reject a plea deal where the prosecutor knows that the case will end up getting dismissed.
Right. Wayne, let's go to you. Thank you, Kate, for all of that. Your organization, our organization, has been following this now since February of 24, very invested in it. Talk about what this case means to you personally and what it means to Animal Wellness Action.
Well, Joseph, occasionally you have moments where people do savage, terrible things to animals, and they kind of break through and become almost a learning moment as well as kind of a horrifying revelation for the public. And I think Cody Roberts and what he did to this young adolescent female wolf really is in that small batch of cases that really break through and remind us that people are capable of doing really terrible things to innocent animals, vulnerable animals. I think of Michael Vick and the dogfighting case that he was at the center of in the 2000 aughts. I think of, it's a little bit different, but Walter Palmer, a Minnesota dentist who lured an African lion out of Wangi National Park in Zimbabwe and shot that animal after baiting him to come out of the park. There are lots of anti-cruelty laws named for animal victims. Pets and other animals who had names have come to symbolize cruelty in its most acute form, and lawmakers have acted and passed a law in the name of the animal who was a victim. And I think all of this speaks to our collective wish that people who do these things are punished for those activities, that it's not just a normal course of human behavior or activities, but it's an expression of malice. It is a reflection of the loss of empathy. It is also perhaps an indicator of their larger threat and menace to society, whether it's other animals or a child or a spouse in the household, if it's other members of the community who are put at risk by people who literally don't have an on switch when it comes to empathy. This is a very disturbing fact pattern. A man sought out a wolf with a snow machine, a 700-pound, snowmobile. The wolf was not bothering him. The wolf was trying to live her life, just a young animal, trying to make it in a tough, wild world, trying to feed herself and live through, bouts of terrible weather, threats from other conspecifics, members of her species that might be exhibiting territorial behavior. This man comes along and rams her and runs her over just for the fun of it. And then to compound the horror of the thing, he takes her captive, as you said in your very good setup. He bound her mouth shut and, was kind of feeling some sort of joy and happiness as the animal was suffering. As we named her Thea, named after the goddess of light, to really remind people that this is an individual, not just a wolf. It's an individual being who wanted to live just as much as each of us wants to live. And then he, sought no medical treatment for her when the life was passing from her, and continued to then revel in it, and sought a larger audience by going to a bar to, I guess, show off. I mean, I guess that's what he thought, but fortunately there's some other members of the community who saw the issue very differently than he did. Didn't think it was a celebratory moment, but actually thought it was an example of very sadistic behavior. So, Joseph, you ask why. I mean, I think it's the acuteness and the savagery that drew us. And as an organization, we're not bystanders. We want to intervene. We want to seek justice for people who do horrible things to animals and to society. But more than that, we want to prevent these things from occurring in the future. That's why we work to pass laws to forbid actions like this. So we don't have to experience the emotional pain of putting ourselves in the place of this young animal who was so horribly victimized.
So, right. Thank
for
you.
me, yeah.
No,
please.
Go ahead, Wayne. I'm sorry.
No, I was. You moved the discussion along with me, please.
No, thank you. One of the laws that Animal Wellness Action is championing, which relates to this case, is the Snowmobiles Aren't Weapons Act. In a second, I'll ask you to talk about that, but I want to let people know who are just joining us on Facebook Live that we are monitoring off camera a live feed from the courthouse, and one of our associates will interrupt us to let us know of any breaking news and information. We're waiting to hear if there's a decision handed down by the judge today, whether to accept the plea deal in the Cody Roberts case, whether he'll reject it and potentially move the case to trial as it's scheduled currently for March 9th. So, Wayne, tell us a little bit about the Snowmobiles Aren't Weapons Act, and would that law, had it been law at the time, made a difference with Cody Roberts?
Joseph, I think it's a little bit odd that Cody Roberts is being charged with animal cruelty when really he should have been charged under wildlife protection laws that should have been in place. But there is no law in Wyoming to forbid running down animals with snowmobiles. Minnesota has such a statute. Neighboring, which Minnesota, again, a mecca of winter sports like snowmobiling and snowshoeing and skiing, cross-country style skiing. And Minnesota also happens among the lower 48 states have the largest population of wolves. This law was enacted in 1986. There's been no problem with it. Hunting groups have no quarrel with it. Ranching groups have no quarrel with it. Obviously, animal welfare groups celebrate it. And Wyoming doesn't have such a law. Colorado does have such a legal standard as well, the neighboring state to the south of Wyoming. Oregon has a statute that also forbids this. So it would not be unusual for Wyoming to have a law like this. And what shocked me about this case was that, I shouldn't say I was shocked. What disturbed me was that there was and this did not disturb me, there was an immediate reaction from some Wyoming politicians that this was a horrible thing that was done to this animal. There were expressions of anger and there were promises to do something about it. But since then, you had the ranching community in Wyoming saying, "Oh, well, we may need to use snowmobiles to, deal with predators, like running them over."
Wayne, let me interrupt you for one second, Wayne, because
Sure.
Lindsay's interjected. She's monitoring the live stream. Lindsay, what are you hearing?
He just changed his plea to guilty on a felony cruelty charge.
Okay. All right. Very good.
And
so-
Joseph, let me just say, he changed it from his original plea of not guilty. So this is consistent with what has been reported, which is that a plea agreement had been reached between Roberts and his attorney and the prosecutor. And I think this is the event that Kate Schultz, our former prosecutor and my colleague at Animal Wellness Action, described about this proceeding.
The judge also said that if he pleads guilty to the felony charge, that he will never be allowed to have a gun, to own a gun, never allowed to hunt.
Well,
All
I
right,
think that's really
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Well, I think that's very good. I mean, the idea of having this man for a probation period of 18 months, not allowed to hunt or have a gun or not go to a bar, that was really deficient. So this is a guy who has done something so awful that he should not be allowed to get into a setting where violence against an animal is part of the whole process, but then he can abuse even the rules and the laws. So I think Lindsay, that's really good. Thank you for that report. I'm glad to hear on both the firearms possession issue as well as the no hunting. Then let me just say, this guy's a hunter. He's a particular type of hunter. He's a hound hunter. He chases mountain lions with packs of dogs, drives them up trees and shoots them. I think he's really on the extreme end If people who hunt mountain lions with packs of dogs are committing, an act of cruelty, in my opinion, maybe not a legal act in the sense that it's violating a law, but it's cruel in an objective sense, with the dogs attacking the lion, the dogs outnumbering the lion fleeing, racing up a tree to escape the pack of dogs, kind of simulating what wolves and lions might do in terms of an interaction, and then going to the base of the tree and shooting an animal out of the tree, which is the moral and sporting equivalent of shooting an animal in a cage at a zoo. And you're doing it to shoot a cat. I mean, the mountain lion hunters will say, oh, they eat the animals. Give me a break. They're doing it for a trophy. They're not doing it for food. We don't eat cats. We don't eat dogs in our society. And even if they do choke it down to make some sort of point, it's not the motivation for them. They're doing that as a sort of behavioral cover-up for their cruel and unsporting practice.
Yeah, that's a meaningful punishment. I'm a gun owner. I don't hunt, but I like to own my firearms. And if I were to lose my right to own a firearm, that would be a meaningful consequence for me. Kate, so two of my questions have been answered with what Lindsay just brought us. One is whether he would plead guilty or no contest. There's a fine line, and perhaps you can explain it, but there's a difference between saying, you got me, versus I did it, I think is the difference there. And then also, you and I had talked about whether, in fact, some of these consequences would be permanent, and apparently they are. What's your take on what you're hearing from Lindsay from inside the courtroom?
Sure. Well, some jurisdictions do not do no contest pleas. I have to caveat this by saying I'm not a Wyoming lawyer. I'm a lawyer in Oregon and in New York. But in the jurisdictions I have worked in, it is always a guilty or not guilty plea. Some jurisdictions do accept things like no contest, which functions the exact same thing as a guilty plea, or functions the exact same way as a guilty plea. Some places even allow pleas where the defendant does not even plea no contest necessarily. The defendant essentially says, I'm not even saying at all whether or not I did it, but I'm just going to plead guilty because I think I'll be convicted at trial. That's generally frowned upon. We don't have that here. Here we have a guilty plea. I like that. It is clear. He has admitted culpability to this horrific crime and a felony, which, as we were just talking about, felonies are no laughing matter. Felonies affect you for the rest of your life. They're on your record every single time you apply for the job, whenever you're pulled over by a police officer, even just, driving a little fast. You cannot own a firearm for the rest of your life having a felony. You cannot vote having a felony. It really impacts your life in a lot of ways. You may not even be able to travel as you normally do having a felony, because sometimes when you go to a foreign country for a visa, they ask your criminal record history and they might deny you a visa. There's a lot of different examples. Depending on the person, it may affect them more or less. But in general,
Lindsay's back with us, and I
yes.
hate to interrupt you, but what's the
Yeah.
latest?
So the prosecutor is providing evidence of the prolonged torture and torment of the wolf, going into detail about how Cody carried the wolf through the bar, apparently, and provided evidence regarding people that saw it, took pictures, and it seems very quiet and solemn in the courtroom. People seem very shocked by what's the picture that they're painting.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, that certainly corroborates a lot of our reporting, I'll call it, on the issue to date. Shocking the conscious, indeed, the details do. Wayne, how surprised are you that in a state known for its anti-wolf attitude, and I hope I'm saying that fairly, that we've gotten to this point? Are you surprised by what's happening in this case?
Well, I think this really underscores the role that groups like Animal Wellness Action and other advocates play in the judicial system. I mean, American citizens are participants in the judicial processes that play out every day in America, right? We're calling in crimes to the police or other authorities and alerting them to a crime in progress. We serve as witnesses in cases like the one here that Lindsay just described, that obviously there were people who were present who passed on information about Robert's behavior, and that was really important in the progress of this case. It was material evidence that the prosecutor is using to paint a picture for a judge or a jury, whichever the audience may happen to be in a particular proceeding. And obviously, we have kind of extrajudicial roles at some level, in that we can call from the outside and say, hey, judge, this man is a threat. Look at the sociological literature on the correlation between vicious acts of animal cruelty and other socially dangerous behavior, whether it's domestic violence, or it's getting into bar fights and beating people up and hurting them or nearly killing them, all sorts of manifestations of this. And I think that the spotlight that we shined on this case, and the voices that were raised all over the world independently, citizens just speaking up, or citizens speaking up in a collective way through organizations like Animal Wellness Action, it really propelled this case forward, right? The prosecutor took quite a while to bring charges. Kate may be able to tell us. I'll just interrupt this for a moment, just ask Kate. I mean, Kate, I'm not sure how many months elapsed between the revelations about Robert's acts of cruelty and when charges were filed, but I'm thinking it was at least 18 months or so, wasn't it?
It was quite a long time. I don't have the number of months off the top of my head, but it was a substantially long period of time.
Is that unusual?
Yes and no. I was not surprised, and I think many people were worried, rightfully so, that, this would keep on going on and we would just never see charges in the end. In this particular case, given how seriously this particular prosecutor seemed to be taking from a whole number of other sort of reports, we suspected he was taking it very seriously. There were a lot of legal and evidentiary issues to parse in this case, and I think that this prosecutor wanted to be 1000% sure that if he brought these charges, they would work, they would stick, and he could hopefully bring it to trial. There was the legal issue about whether, and indeed there was actually motion practice on this issue not too long ago, whether or not what happened actually violated Wyoming's animal anti-cruelty law. Luckily, the judge decided, I think correctly, in that the described or the alleged, well now not even alleged, what actually did in fact happen does in fact constitute a felony animal cruelty charge under Wyoming law. So the district attorney had to parse that, had to work on that, figure that out. And also we know that there may have been evidentiary gathering issues. Even though there was video and photos, you always need a live human witness. You always need someone. And we suspect, or we sort of have hints that that may have been a problem, actually getting someone willing to testify, putting themselves out there. And, I just wanted to take a moment to pause and think about what Wayne just said, the fact that this was videotaped and filmed and people saw it. That is so important. What Wayne said is, it's one of the biggest cruxes of these issues, of animal cruelty issues. Animals cannot speak. They're not even human children, who sometimes can cry, or teachers can notice a behavioral change. Animals do not speak the language that we speak, so we have to be their voices. One of the ways we as ordinary citizens can be their voices is to take videos, to take photos, or if you don't have a phone on you or you don't feel comfortable doing that, report it, tell someone, come out, go to a local authority, call in, walk into a police station. That is so important. as a former animal cruelty prosecutor, I had to rely on what people were telling me, what the community was telling me, or, in some scenarios, what the expert forensic veterinarian could tell me looking at the, the evidence from a body. But I have to say that animal cruelty crimes is really one of the crimes where it takes the community speaking up. So what Wayne said about the fact that this was videotaped and filmed, I mean, we would not be here today had not people taken note and done what they should do as ethical citizens.
Yeah, it's a new
What do you
day. I
make
think.
of?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Joseph.
Wayne. I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
I just want to say I think it's a new day because all of us are possessed with video and camera because we have smartphones. That in an earlier generation we didn't have that, right? We were just witnesses with our eyes, but this really presents opportunities for us to participate in meaningful ways to deter cruelty and also to report cruelty. But yes, go ahead, Joseph.
No, thank you. Well, on the matter of the photograph, the one we've used quite a bit, where Cody is kneeling beside the wolf, and you look at that wolf's face, and you just see defeat. It's one of the most emotional photos I think I've seen of an animal in duress. It's so heartbreaking. Kate, what do you make of the fact that the prosecutor took this case to a grand jury? Does that indicate perhaps he was skeptical that he had anything to stand on, or was he crossing T's and dotting I's?
Sure. And before I forget, Joseph, I just wanted to go back a little bit. You know what? Let's wait. Maybe should we go to Lindsay right now?
That's great. Let's go to Lindsay right now.
So I just wanted to mention that the judge just spoke and said that he was struck by the amount of people and public wanting to speak with him and the thousands of emails he got regarding this case. He also said that he is reviewing the plea agreement, but right now they're talking about Cody Roberts' probation and bond, so it sounds as though he is accepting the plea of guilty.
All right, but he's not formally announced, I'm accepting this plea deal.
He has not said those words yet, no. And he has stated that the sentencing will be at a different time.
Okay.
Well, and
will you let us know, please, when that is wrapped up?
Yes.
Please, or thank you, Wayne.
No, I was just going to say that what Lindsay's report is telling us, I think, is really significant for us as an organization, right? That we debated internally whether or not we should ask people to write to the judge, and it was my view that we should, because judges are public servants, whether they're elected or they're appointed, they play a crucial role in our justice system, but they are not immune from the world at large and the opinions of the people of the state or the nation. And I've seen it happen many times that judges welcome this sort of input. It's a measure of the importance of the proceeding before him or her. And I felt that polite expressions of keen interest and demands for justice were appropriate. Just like I also felt that it was appropriate for us to press the prosecutor. And I really want to provide a tip of the hat to the prosecutor in this case. I mean, he clearly exhibited great diligence in amassing evidence, as Kate indicated, was very careful about this, was not precipitous, and was looking at the law, because that's what prosecutors have to do, right? They don't just look at outrage factor, they have to look at the pattern of behavior, the facts as he can understand them through evidence and measure them against the law. So he's done that. I am hoping for more stern punishments than what the terms were in the plea agreement. But that's partly a matter for the judge to consider. And we don't think that we know all in this regard. I think what our opinion is take a real serious look at this character. This is a person who has a history of violence. This is a savage act. And we know from the literature that these are not one-off events. This man has a problem. It's apparent to me. I'm not a psychologist. the letter that we released a couple days ago from 2 psychologists and 1 forensic scientist. They believe that the fact patterns here with this man are disturbing and warrant additional attention. And the law is there to maintain order, but it's also meant to protect people, right? That's why we incarcerate people. It's not just a punishment, it's a walling off of people from the rest of society so we cannot be harmed during their period of incarceration. And I think that is a really important expression of sentiment, not a mob rule sort of thing, but an honest expression of anger and emotion, and a call to have norms and to have rules in a civil society. And this guy's way out of bounds. And frankly, I'm just super disappointed in Wyoming politicians as well. We had a circumstance here where we have a glaring gap in the law, right? This animal cruelty statute, with all of its exemptions and all of its infirmities, was not a perfect law for this prosecution. And really, the prosecutor had to kind of fashion his case around the capture of the animal, not the actual ramming and crushing of the animal with a snowmobile, which to me was the most horrible element of this. There should have been a law to forbid that. And Wyoming saw it. There was a global spotlight on it. There was a spotlight on the lawmakers in Cheyenne, and they failed. Some lawmakers did press the case, but then they listened to these special interest ranchers who made the absurd argument that this is a valuable tool for predator management. I can't tell you, I think that I've been in so many legislative settings, and I've seen this attitude of indifference by these ranching groups and hunting groups and livestock interests, that they just aren't involved in doing anything from an animal welfare policy perspective. They just want to find
All right,
fault.
let's go to Lindsay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wayne. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
No.
Lindsay, what's the latest?
So the prosecution is recommending 18 months and $5,000, and they're discussing the conditions of bond right now.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Thank you for that. Wayne, again, apologies for the interruption.
No,
Please finish.
I'm eagerly awaiting Lindsay's updates. Keep them coming, Lindsay. Thank you for this really important, very timely reporting of what's happening right now at that proceeding in the court. I was just saying, Joseph, and I'm fresh. I was up until 2 a.m. last night in the U.S. House of Representatives Agriculture Committee meeting room where they were marking up the farm bill. And we had a bill that was offered as an amendment, the FIGHT Act, to combat dogfighting and cockfighting, and a bunch of lawmakers from rural districts were panning the idea of the provisions of the FIGHT Act. And they were saying, oh, we already have animal cruelty laws, as if a little state statute riddled with holes is going to deal with the systemic forms of cruelty that exist in manifold forms in our society. Dogfighting and cockfighting cannot be combated by an anti-cruelty statute. We need specific provisions in the law to address the set of activities that are at the base of these organized criminal associations. And these lawmakers gutted the FIGHT Act in committee. Now, we're not done. We're gonna rise again and get something done. But they kept one provision to make the gambling illegal at a dogfight or a cockfight, whether broadcast or live, which was one of the provisions that we wrote in the bill. But they dumped provisions about a private right of action by a citizen to bring a proceeding against a dogfighter or a cockfighter. They dumped the provision to ban the shipping of adult roosters through the U.S. mail for cockfighting. And the lawmakers said, oh, we're introducing farm animals into the Animal Welfare Act, which is a national animal welfare statute. They're completely wrong. These people haven't looked at the law. They have a responsibility to do oversight as an agriculture committee over the USDA and over animal welfare enforcement. They've completely abdicated that responsibility or abrogated that responsibility. And they haven't had a hearing on animal welfare in 25 years. They haven't done any oversight in the history of the committee. Yet the chairman of the committee had the nerve to say, we don't have any farm animals in the Animal Welfare Act. And the animal welfare people with this anti-dog fighting, anti-cockfighting law are trying to wedge farm animals into the law because there's a definition of a rooster in the bill. I hate to tell these lawmakers that since 1976, we've had a national animal fighting law that has included dogs and chickens, and you're not allowed to stage fights or move them across interstate lines or a number of different prohibitions. Perhaps they don't understand, these people who claim to be advocates of farming, that a rooster is a male chicken. A rooster is a subset of chicken. And if they looked for 2 seconds, they could have seen exactly that for 50 years, chickens have been in the section of the Animal Welfare Act that deals with animal fighting. And my point is that don't count on some of these lawmakers for having great insights. Don't count on them for doing the right thing. The right thing happens when citizens push and prod and demand and organize. And I think we did a little bit of that in this Cody Roberts case in pushing the prosecutor and pushing the judge. And that's a very appropriate role for us.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Very well said. Lindsay?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that court has adjourned, that Mr. Roberts had no questions, said that he understood the charges. He understood, what he was being charged with. And he, mentioned that he had 4 children. He talked about, what school he went to. So he answered personal questions. But he very much mentioned that, he understood and was of sound mind to enter this plea of guilty.
Lindsay, unfair question perhaps. Did you get a sense of his tone? Did you see him aggrieved? Did you see him penitent? What did you hear behind his words?
There wasn't really any emotion behind his words, to be honest. It just felt like he was sort of, and again, it's just my opinion, but, fed the answers to say yes, no. He didn't express, to my understanding, any remorse. They didn't give him an opportunity, perhaps, to say that he was sorry or, that it was a mistake or anything like that. I did not hear that on the live stream.
I must say, I always find that.
What is your best guess? Go ahead, Wayne.
No, please, go ahead, Joseph.
No. Well, I was just going to ask Lindsay before we segued away from her, whether she has a sense from when the judge will say, I accept this or I don't accept this. Or do you perceive that?
He said that he was going to review it and that they would, have sentencing at a later date. But again, to Wayne's point, he mentioned that he had 4 children, and I don't know, as a mother myself, just listening to that and not expressing any remorse it was surprising to me.
All right. Kate?
Yes.
Was the adjournment for lunch or to resume after lunch, or was it adjourning the docket for today? Do we know?
I believe it was for today.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like we'll get a formal acceptance. Everything I'm hearing, Wayne, Kate, indicates that this is a done deal for all intents and purposes. Certainly when that formal acceptance is announced by the judge or whatever the next formal step is, we'll let everyone know what that is through our social media platforms. So why don't we take a couple of minutes to wrap up? Maybe our correspondent inside will have a chance to come out and meet with us. But let me now turn to first Kate, then Wayne for final thoughts, please. Kate?
I will say that is very unusual that the judge does not immediately accept a plea. I have to eat my own words because I told Joseph he would not be having a court appearance and taking that time without already knowing whether or not he will be accepting the plea. So I will eat my words there. I was wrong. That is extraordinarily unusual. It is also not extraordinarily unusual, but atypical for the prosecutor to go into such depth about what happened. The prosecutor does not need to do that legally. That is the prosecutor making a statement. That is the prosecutor speaking to the public through his words to the court. That is the prosecutor saying how horrific he found this. And the judge saying how many emails he got. That is the judge saying, taking a moment to say professionally what he can say, that I think that this case was striking to him as well. So I think, little things like that. But as a lawyer, when I'm looking at that, I'm taking note. I'm saying, wow, this prosecutor, this is probably the most important case of this prosecutor's year, or maybe 2 years, which is nothing to sneeze at, as I like to say.
All right. Thank you, Kate. Wayne, final thoughts.
Well, I was just going to say that really, if the prosecution of Cody Roberts is the only outcome of the revelations that happened in Sublette County with the running over and crushing and then capturing and tormenting of this wolf, I'd be extremely disappointed. The one outcome that we need to see is a more comprehensive law in Wyoming to stop people from running over animals, snowmobiles. They're forbidding it unless you can do it as long as you quickly kill the animal after you do it. I mean, what's a travesty? We also now have a Snowmobiles Aren't Weapons Act, the SAW Act in Congress. It's a bill. We need to turn it into a law. It needs to go through the legislative process. And again, these groups like the Safari Club and the NRA saying that, we don't need this law. How embarrassing and how pathetic are they? They think because they buy a hunting license that makes them a conservationist, just like if an oil company, buys a lease in the ocean that makes them a marine protector. They need to act. Conservation is an active process of preserving nature and systems and responsibly behaving with animals and being a proper custodian, being a steward of wildlife. And if anyone has to think for more than 2 seconds about whether running over an animal with a snowmobile is wrong, they've got a serious issue. And all of this excuse making and all these special interests who just keep defending the indefensible, it makes me sick. And you better believe that we're going to continue to press the case at Animal Wellness Action. And we're going to call out these people, lawmakers who, really don't have any sensibilities and sensitivities on these issues, often have a very poor understanding of the law, haven't even taken the time to read the statutes or do their job in terms of oversight. We also, this case triggered, my work with Kate, who's our senior attorney, and Scott Edwards, our general counsel, to really step into the national wolf protection efforts, to sue the United States Fish and Wildlife Service for efforts to remove federal protections for wolves, and therefore to turn over responsibility for managing wolves to the states, when these states can't even make a simple decision to stop running over animals with snowmobiles. So we are all in. And the Roberts case has radiated out much more broadly than just this court proceeding, which is very important. And we're really interested in that outcome. And I hope that and Kate will tell me if this was already part of the plea agreement, but I didn't hear that he would lose hunting privileges and firearms possession privileges for life. I had heard that it was going to be for 18 months. So if that's an additional element, kudos to all of you who reached out and contacted the judge to make the case for a sterner penalty here.
The firearm privileges he would lose because he would be convicted of a felony. There's a lot of little legal nitpickiness here that I won't go into, but it appears that under Wyoming law, this particular felony does qualify for losing firearm privileges, your constitutional right to bear arms, for life. The no hunting, according to the plea deal we had seen, did appear to be for the 18 months, but it seems that either some changes have been made or the judge wants to extend that for life, or, I wasn't in the courtroom. I didn't hear exactly what the judge said. Maybe he's referring to you can't hunt with a firearm for the rest of your life because you can't own a firearm or use a firearm. It'll be interesting to see in the final language whether or not it really does specify you cannot ever hunt again, regardless of the weapon you use. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what ends up resulting that way. But
no, thank you, thank you for that.
Right.
Thank you. But Joseph, just finally, let me just say that this case, like so many other serious cases, they have to be levered off of in order to drive larger reform. And that's really what we're about at the organization. And whether it's litigation or congressional action or state legislative action or awareness building, this is an important case, and we're going to stick with it.
All right, very good. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insight into the case. Kate, your legal knowledge has been invaluable. So grateful for you. Lindsay, appreciate your being attentive to what's going on. And then behind the scenes, Ryan, our producer. Thank you very much. AnimalWellnessAction.org. If you're watching this on Facebook, please go to our website. You can easily sign up for Wayne's blogs, all of our news alerts. You can support our work in multiple ways, including by taking quick action, the kind that generated letters to the judge in this case, and we believe may have made a difference in the outcome we're learning about today. And we've received hundreds of comments. I've been watching them, and I take no umbrage at some of them, but some of them are fairly vitriolic. But I got to tell you, the vast majority of them are certainly supportive of the work we're doing and what is going on with Cody Roberts. So thank you all very much. Thank you for watching. Thank you, guests.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Kate.
thank you, Joseph.